At 70, Alain Prost reveals his 5 toughest rivals ever. He didn't speak at the funeral. He stood near the back, behind the mechanics, behind the engineers, behind everyone who had earned the right to grieve loudly. Ayrton Senna had been dead for less than 18 hours, and Alain Prost stood still in a way that suggested he had already known, for years, that this ending was the only one available to them. That is where this story begins. Not at the podium. Not in the victory lane, in the quiet space behind a coffin where the most decorated rivalry in the history of the sport finally, completely, ran out of road. Prost turned 70 this year. He does not celebrate that number. He acknowledges it, the way a man acknowledges an old scar, aware of it, unable to pretend it isn't there. And in rare, careful conversation over the past several months, he has done something he spent most of his career refusing to do. He named them. 5 men. 5 specific, irreversible chapters. He did not call them enemies. He did not call them rivals, exactly. He used a word that translates roughly from the French as the ones who required everything of me. What he did not say, what he has never said, is how much was taken in return. Alain Prost won 4 Formula One World Championships. By every official measure, he is the most successful driver France has ever produced, and one of the most technically precise the sport has seen. The numbers do not lie. But numbers in this sport are also the oldest form of misdirection. They tell you what was won. They do not tell you what was surrendered in the act of winning it. The first name on his list is not Senna. Niki Lauda, Austrian, brutal in his efficiency. A man who had survived a fire in 1976 that removed the skin from his face and replaced it with something that no longer moved the way faces move, and yet returned to racing 42 days later because he had decided that the mathematics of risk were simply not complete without him in the car. Lauda was already a champion twice over when Prost arrived at McLaren in 1984. What followed was not a mentorship. It was an education conducted entirely through competition, where the lesson was delivered not in words, but in tenths of a second. Prost won that championship by half a point, the smallest margin in the history of the sport, at that time. What the scoreboard did not explain, what it still does not fully explain, is that Prost had won 7 races that season to Lauda's 5. He had been the faster man across nearly every metric that measured speed. And he still almost lost. Because Lauda had not been trying to be the fastest man. He had been trying to be the last man standing at the precise moment it mattered. Lauda did not beat Prost with pace. He beat him with arithmetic. The understanding that winning at the slowest speed necessary is the highest form of mastery this sport contains. That was the education. Win more races, score more points in total, demonstrate superiority across an entire season, and still find yourself half a point from losing everything to a man who simply refused to waste. Prost absorbed that lesson completely. It would define everything that followed, and it would cost him in ways neither of them could have predicted for the rest of his career. Prost has said in recent interviews that Lauda taught him something he would spend the rest of his career trying to operationalize, that the mind breaks first before the body, before the machine. The body can be pushed. The machine can be repaired. The mind, once it has calculated the full cost of what it is doing, the mind begins to negotiate. Lauda had solved that problem by burning it away, literally. Prost had to find another solution. The solution he arrived at was precision so total that it left no room for doubt or feeling or anything that could not be measured. It was a cold solution. It worked, and it would eventually make him one of the most misunderstood men the sport has produced. The second name is Nelson Piquet, Brazilian, 3-time champion. A man who understood that psychological combat was simply an extension of the race, conducted without the inconvenience of regulations. Piquet's method was direct. He did not attack Prost on the track if he could destabilize him off at first. The press conferences during those years were exercises in controlled demolition. Piquet would say something precise and damaging. Prost would respond with calibrated calm. And then, in the garage, in the hours before the next session, whatever Piquet had said would still be there, quietly occupying space that should have belonged to focus and preparation. Prost won those confrontations more often than he lost them. But winning a psychological war in motorsport means you were already fighting one. That is its own kind of loss. The third name on his list is his own team. In 1991, Prost was driving for Ferrari. He had left McLaren after Senna arrived, after the politics became impossible, and the machinery became a question he could no longer trust to be answered honestly. Ferrari was supposed to be different. It was not different. The car that season was not competitive. Prost said so, publicly. He called it a truck. The word traveled. Ferrari's response was not an argument. It was a contract termination, effective immediately, with 2 races remaining in the season. He was sent home before the year was finished, not for poor results, but for an accurate description of the car producing them. There is a version of that story where Prost is reckless and insubordinate. There is another version, the version supported by the lap times, by the chassis data, by the engineers who quietly left Ferrari the following year, where he was simply correct. Ferrari did not issue a correction. He sat out the entire 1992 season, 1 year of silence in his prime, because telling the truth inside a team that did not want to hear it had been treated as the greater offense. He watched the races from outside the paddock. He gave no interviews that addressed it directly. The lost income, the atrophied sponsorship relationships, the calendar pages accumulating with nothing in the results column. Those documents do not appear in any official account. They exist somewhere. They always do. The fourth name is Williams. More specifically, the contract he signed with them. Prost returned in 1993 to the best car on the grid. Before he put his name on the agreement, he inserted a clause. It was not complicated. It stated that Ayrton Senna could not be his teammate. One sentence, one deliberate deletion. After years of being outmaneuvered, psychologically, politically, mechanically, Prost had arrived at the conclusion that the most efficient solution was to simply remove the variable from the equation entirely. He won the championship that year. His fourth. The clause held, Senna went elsewhere. What Prost could not account for, what no contract clause addresses, is what it costs to build a wall that high. The team had not fully decided it wanted him there. Mansell had departed for IndyCar in part because the team had chosen Prost, and that fracture never fully closed. Prost was winning races inside a structure that regarded his presence as a transaction rather than a partnership. He had secured the conditions for success. He had not secured the room. He retired at the end of 1993. He stated it, the way you state a fact that has been true for some time and simply needed to be made public. He was 38 years old. He had more championships than any driver in history at that point. He drove away from the sport in a way that suggested the sport had not, entirely, driven toward him. The fifth name is Senna. There is almost nothing new to say about Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost that has not already been said, which means the most important things remain unsaid. They crashed into each other at Suzuka in 1989. Deliberately, most concluded. The investigation concluded with Senna disqualified. Prost took the championship. The following year, they crashed again. Same corner, same race. Senna took the title. Between those two events, there was a dinner. A private meeting. Neither man confirmed what was said. Whatever was attempted there was insufficient. The calendar moved forward regardless. But before any of that, before the crashes, before the clauses, before the retirement, there was 1988. That season, Prost outscored Senna in total points, not by a small margin. Comprehensively. By every measure of accumulated performance across a full year of racing, Prost was the superior driver. He did not win the championship. The rules that year discarded the lowest scoring races, counting only the best 11 results. Under that system, Senna's peaks outweighed Prost's consistency. The math, applied correctly, produced the wrong answer. The ledger did not balance, and Prost had done nothing wrong. That is the year that never appears on his trophy shelf. That is the year that, more than any crash, any contract, any press conference, explains the particular quality of his silence. On May 1st, 1994, Senna's car left the road at Tamburello. Prost had already retired. He was not there as a driver. He was there as something the sport had no official category for. A former rival, the man who had spent a decade trying to stay ahead of this particular person, now standing in the space that grief assigns when it cannot find a more accurate word. In the months before Imola, Senna had said something in a radio transmission during a test that Prost has not repeated publicly, that he missed him, that the racing had changed without him in it. Prost has confirmed the conversation existed. He has not confirmed what he said in return. He has not confirmed whether he said anything at all. He still does not speak about it directly. When the subject arrives, he allows it to arrive, and then he allows it to pass. The words he has used across 30 years of interviews are remarkably consistent. I think about it. Not what he thinks. Not how often. Only that the thinking continues, without cessation, without conclusion. 4 championships, a career of controlled, deliberate mastery. 5 names that never resolved the way victories are supposed to resolve. He won the war. And in doing so, he lost the only person who ever truly understood why it was worth fighting. The ledger of Alain Prost does not balance. It never has. At 70, standing at the correct distance from everything that happened, he appears to know this. He does not say it. He doesn't need to. The math has always been visible. It simply required someone willing to count correctly.